Hi there. Welcome back to Not an Audio Review channel where I don't review audio gear. Got this blue soldering pad and I realized it moves around on the desk a lot less than the comic book paper. Also, that's a nice color, right? Today, let's talk about power cables. How they sound. There's another one over here. Wait, what are you typing in the comments? Don't type that. What? Hey, you, do you kiss your mother with that mouth? What'd you say about my mother? Oh God, that's disgusting. Okay, wait, stop. We have to talk about something else first. Let's get these out of here. So, we live in a capitalist economic system. I see you again in the comments already. This isn't the channel where I complain about that. But in a capitalist economic system, companies have a profit motive to price gouge you and defraud you. This doesn't mean they necessarily will, only that they have a motive to. Now, there are checks on this in our system. Competition, in theory, combats price gouging, and there's a free press to call out fraud and a government with laws and regulations and so forth. But these checks can and will never be perfect for all kinds of reasons. There's no hobby I've been involved in where I've seen more claims of fraud, snake oil, and shills than audio. And it's easy to understand why. This is an Apple headphone dongle. It costs $8. And this is a DCS Bartok headphone amp and DAC. It has an MSRP of $20,000. At the barest essentials, these two perform the same function. They take digital information from a source and provide an amplified analog signal for your headphones. Yes, the Bartok can run balanced as a preamp outputs and a knob and even streaming support, but you see what I'm saying. And anyway, there's much less expensive devices that have all these features too. And I mean, there's thousands of devices between these two price ranges, and even things more expensive than the Bartok. How should you evaluate whether anything is worth its price? One response to this question is scientific testing. Certainly you can measure the linearity of these amplifiers, which is to say you measure the frequency response of the signal going in and the one coming out, and confirm that they're the same but amplified. I guarantee both of these DAC amps would have virtually the same linearity. There's other things you can measure, but honestly, with source gear like this, unless something has gone very wrong, the measurements will probably be very similar, though the Bartok would obviously have a lot more power than the dongle. But again, you can get that much power from devices that are much less expensive. So is the Bartok merely a lifestyle product, a version of the Veblen effect, where something has value because it's expensive and prestigious, like a Porsche? There's a video on Jay's Yagi where Jay gave a classical musician a blind listen to $1,000 speakers and $10,000 speakers, and then afterwards asks if he thinks the 10K speaker is worth that much money. And the musician says yes, because of the finish, the way it looks.
I would say yes, because of the finish.
Yep.
The finish, you have to live with that. I think that the finish is more nicer. The sound also,
And maybe you're willing to pay for something that looks very, very nice. So is that all this is about? Now, if you read reviews of the Bartok, you'll see the sound described as wonderfully stable and focused with an impressive sense of control and texture and subtlety. But perhaps that reviewer is a shill paid by the company to pretend they're giving their impartial opinion. But wait. I have an Aune S17 Pro headphone amplifier and an SMSL VMV D2R DAC, which together cost me about $1,700. And I think they sound much better than the Apple dongle, warm and fun while still being highly clear and detailed. I mean, you might think I'm a paid shill, and I'm not really here to convince you to trust me, but I know I'm not one anyway. Nobody's paid me to say nice things about my baby. Oh no, Daddy really loves you, my sweets. It's not that the Apple dongle sounds bad, it's just that these beauties sound better, to me. Now, the thing is, there's obviously some measurable differences between my S17 Pro and the Apple dongle. There's even measurable differences between two different power cables that are constructed differently or out of different materials. Despite the way some people frame this, the debate isn't actually about whether these things measure differently. The debate is in whether those differences are audible to humans. So how do we test whether differences are audible to humans? Well, a typical answer is a blind ABX test. I put a blindfold on and someone else plays device A, and then plays device B, and then plays either device A or B, and asks me if I can tell which one it is. But there's a number of problems with ABX tests. The first is that they're difficult to perform well. For example, people will say you need to leave the room as each item is switched so that there aren't any sounds that tip you off as to which unit is being dealt with. Also, you have to have a statistically significant number of results. Jay from JZ Yagi again went to speaker manufacturer and YouTuber Danny from GR Research and had him do a blind test with his speaker cables, and Danny correctly identified 9 out of 10 cables. But people complained that this wasn't a scientifically significant result. You needed him to test way more times to prove that this wasn't just random chance. Plus, sometimes these tests are done with people who aren't intimately familiar with the gear or music being played, which can affect your ability to pick out small differences. Quick switching between devices can actually make it difficult for us to focus on small differences, and ABX tests are stressful, which can cause you to make mistakes. Passion for Sound actually just did a good video summing up the issues with blind testing as a methodology. But then, even when people do testing within scientific parameters, other people don't believe them. Golden Sound, as big a believer in science as anyone, did a blind test between 2 different DAC reconstruction filters to prove that he could hear a difference between them, and therefore a difference between 2 different DACs that use different reconstruction filters. And folks on a certain forum misunderstood, misrepresented, or dismissed his findings. Indeed, folks who ostensibly say they believe in science will find any way they can to move the goalposts on something which proves their preconceived ideas are wrong, which, isn't how science is supposed to deal with evidence. The YouTube channel IY has made videos where he records his system changing only interconnect cables or power cords and digital cables. And you can hear the difference even over a YouTube video, which isn't a great way to hear how something actually sounds in a room, but it does show you a difference is there. And with these videos, you can hear a difference even on your iPhone speaker. It's always Mr. Right. Lots of people, like IY and like myself, didn't believe in cable differences until they actually heard them, and when they heard them, they couldn't unhear them. And in fact, in reality, the scientific consensus is very much still out on this subject. To quote Jason Stoddard of Shit Audio, the reality is that there's not a lot of money in proving audibility one way or another. Audio isn't another $100 billion drug, nor a breakthrough in cheap and clean energy, or even a new cleaning product that could break 100 million in sales every year. And this is an important fact to keep in mind. As a result, the studies I've seen are relatively fringe, ad hoc, limited, flawed, or all of the above. The most frequently cited, Mayer and Morin, used sources that were not actually high resolution and is directly countered by Bob Stewart's paper on the audibility of digital filters. At the same time, there's psychological evidence that the brain responds differently to sounds containing inaudible supersonic components. Google inaudible high-frequency sounds affect brain activity, hypersonic effect. And there is significant evidence that experienced listeners can hear the differences in amplifiers, but not DACs, in Interfidelity's recent top-end gear shootout. Further confounding things are unproven assertions like our own Mike Moffat's statement that he believes hearing is integrative rather than differential. Now, it's true that fraud exists in the audio space. There was a thing where a company was selling a $30,000 preamp and someone opened it up and the internals looked like some kid's middle school science project. There's people selling audiophile rocks that you put on your gear to improve the sound through no mechanism known to man. There's things, in other words, that really seem like the audiophile equivalent of homeopathy, which is a good example of an obvious fraud that checks in the United States, at least, don't seem capable of combating, which is part of what gives this conversation its moral force, why people get so worked up about it. But this can result in an overreaction where you start proclaiming that a $10 headphone that you EQ to a desired target gives you reference quality sound, or that a $20 preamp from AliExpress is as good or better than preamps that cost thousands of dollars, because of how well it measures. But the whole conversation is fundamentally weird, right? If I listen to my S17 Pro and then listen to the Apple dongle, I know the S17 Pro sounds warmer and fuller. As I said before, I don't need a blind test to tell me apple juice and orange juice taste different. The placebo effect is a phenomenon studied in medicine where when you're testing a drug, for example, you give one group of test subjects the drug and another group a fake pill called a placebo with no drug in it, so that you can directly compare someone who takes it to someone who doesn't. Bizarrely though, in some percentage of people who take the fake pill, the treatment will actually work. Like if you're testing a drug that treats acne, a lot of people in the group who got the fake pill will have their acne clear up anyway. This is the placebo effect. There are those who would claim the differences I hear with the S17 Pro are placebo effect. I think I'm getting a better product. It looks nice, it has a bright color, I paid a bunch of money for it, and so I induce myself to hearing something better than what's actually being produced. You'll also see people point out that audible illusions exist. You can induce your brain to produce sounds that aren't there. Bar, 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 bar. This shows that your ears are simply untrustworthy. Only measurements can be relied on. But I mean, optical illusions exist too. Color theory exists where you put two colors together and they look different. But that doesn't mean we can't see colors, right? So what's going on here? Why are some people so very sure they know all the answers? Part of the problem is something I'm going to call the engineering mindset. Not to be confused with the educational YouTube channel, The Engineering Mindset. Someone with an engineering mindset looks at a problem and says there's either a solution to this problem or there isn't. There might be multiple solutions to a problem, very clever solutions. There might be a problem that isn't solvable now, but someone can figure out how to solve it later. But it's either solved or it isn't. The light goes on or it doesn't. And there's nothing wrong with this per se. It's a very effective way of thinking about things when you're trying to solve definite problems. Caveat, please don't be mad at me. Or do, I'm not the boss of you. But the thing the engineering mindset hates most is ambiguity. Things that simply cannot be definitely known. You can find people in this hobby who will absolutely shut down at the idea that maybe we don't really understand with measurable certainty what people can and cannot hear. And the tools you need to actually wrap your mind around ambiguity and uncertainty aren't found in STEM or engineering, but in the sorely abused and underfunded fields of the humanities, particularly philosophy. One thing you'll hear people say in the audio world is that a DAC simply reproduces the original signal and an amp simply amplifies the original signal. And if it doesn't do that, it's bad or broken, with the implication that if you can measure the signal going in, and it's the same as the signal going out within a reasonable threshold, then the amp and DAC work properly and there's nothing more you need to do. And this makes sense if you're looking at audio strictly as a problem that needs to be solved, rather than as something that produces human sensations meant to be experienced. The signal in your electrical equipment isn't sound, obviously, it's just electricity. That electricity is used to vibrate a transducer in your speakers or headphones, which pushes air molecules around that reach your eardrums, which converts that into electrical impulses that go to your brain, and there, in your brain, is the only place you actually have sound. Sound is something you experience in your mind. Just as a colorblind person can look at a flower and see gray, while someone who isn't colorblind might see red, that experience can be radically different depending on who's experiencing it. Or, for some people, cilantro tastes like soap, and for other people it doesn't. With hearing, we have well-known phenomena, like head-related transfer function, where the literal shape of your ears and body can affect how things sound to you. Or there's whatever causes my treble sensitivity, which makes certain types of treble presentation unpleasant or even painful, or why cup resonances in some headphones give me headaches. So we know the experience of sense perception can be radically different from one person to another. But more than that, fundamentally, how something sounds to someone is unknown to anyone but them.
I look through your eyes, and all the colors are different.
Which of our reds is like the real red? I feel like both of them are, right? If we both can point to a thing and then agree that it's red, then it's red, right?
I don't know.
The philosopher Ludwig Wittgenstein proposed that sensations like pain are what he referred to as a beetle in a box. Without opening the box, you simply can't know the state of the beetle. In medical school, doctors are taught that the way you know a patient is in pain is that they tell you. Only the person themselves really knows what they are experiencing. Because of this, I would actually turn the usual way that this issue is thought about on its head. Rather than someone's stated experience being untrustworthy and only measurements reliable, I would say the only real way you know how anything sounds to anyone is when they tell you what they heard, and it's the measurements that are secondary and only useful in how they might help inform what you hear. Gaslight is a 1944 film based on a 1938 play. In the film, a husband repeatedly tells his wife that things she experiences aren't real and are just her imagination, slowly driving her insane. The film has given rise to the term gaslighting for when someone insists something isn't real when you know that it is. When you tell me that I don't hear the things I hear, whether it's amps, DACs, cables, whatever, it feels like I'm being gaslit.
Well, who are you going to believe, me or your own
Ears. The notion that, for example, a cable being a certain color is responsible for you hearing it differently, to me just sounds like cope. Telling me I need to ABX any little thing I change in my system to know if I'm really hearing it sounds like cope. But go ahead and leave that mean comment now if it makes you feel better. It's always nice to make people feel better. Which, oh yeah, brings us back to power cables. Yeah, I hear a difference with power cables. Oh, what about all the wiring in your walls that's made from cheap copper or whatever? What difference is 1 meter after the plug going to make? I mean, Hans Beekhuizen has a full explanation of that. Sorry if I mispronounced your name, Hans. But basically, the cable can act like a filter and also reject additional EM radiation that doesn't go through your walls but is in the air. But ultimately, I'm not a scientist. I don't care what the explanation is. I hear it. I had an experience recently that emphasizes this for me. If you watched my first video, you know I replaced my MSRP $2,000 headphone amp and preamp with this $400 one that I paid $300 for, the TA-84. When I bought the $2,000 pendant, the guy who sold it to me very kindly also provided me with this power cable. Actually, not this power cable, but one exactly like it, that retails for about $200. After I took the pendant off my desk, I moved the TA-84 and some other stuff around on my desk, and when I plugged everything back in after a bit, I was like, wait, the TA-84 doesn't sound as good. What's going on? And after going through everything and trying some different tubes I had, I realized I'd changed the power cable to this $70 one from Pine Tree. And yep, when I changed the cables back and forth a few times, that was the difference. It's not that the Pine Tree cable sounded bad, it's just the Cullen cable sounded better. This wasn't the first time I heard a difference in cables, but the story of how people come to believe in cables is basically always like this. You don't believe in cables until you hear something you can't deny, and then you do. So now I have a $400 amp with $400 worth of tubes and a $200 power cable. This is absolute madness, stop me before I kill again stuff. Am I recommending you do this if you have this amp? I don't give a shit. This isn't a review channel. I'm not here to help you make purchasing decisions. This is just what I'm doing. But this is the other side of my whole belief that the price I pay for something and the amount I enjoy it have no relation to each other. Sometimes that means I'll like something that's cheap. Other times it means I'll like something that's expensive. The cheaper thing sounding better is a more satisfying narrative, but it's not always how it goes. And this rule is also true for cables. Just because a cable is more expensive doesn't mean you'll like the sound better. In fact, a friend recently lent me a $530 Wireworld cable, and I thought that while the background was blacker and the sound clearer, it was also brighter and sharper in a way I didn't like. More expensive doesn't mean better or more preferable to you personally. So now he's also lent me this Ansuz Mains 8 XTC3 power conditioner that costs $1,800, replacing a Furman one that costs $140. And I really don't want to spend that kind of money on a power conditioner, but like, the sound is better just without qualification. It's clearer and cleaner, and like you can hear the bass better. My wallet's really giving me dirty looks right now. Oh, he also lent me this other cable that costs $300. Wireworld cable. This is much better, actually. This is really, it's terrible. I'm going to be so poor. Anyway, this all leaves us with a question, right? How do you deal with someone who says they hear a difference with Magic Rocks? And the answer is that you don't.
That's the neat thing. You don't.
You just have to make some value judgments for yourself and accept that ambiguity exists and people hear things differently. Homeopathy is still a fraud because it clearly and demonstrably doesn't treat the things it says it treats with the memory water that isn't a thing that exists. But audiophile rocks? Sounds fishy to me, but who the hell knows? In the end, what someone hears is just a beetle in a box. Alright, that's it. Don't forget to like and subscribe and leave a comment telling me how wrong I am and why, or share your experiences. I'm generally interested in hearing about them. Thanks, and see you next time. This is starting to get popular. I don't know. Maybe I should start a Patreon for this or something and get paid for my labor. I also have a Discord server. It's ostensibly the New York Audiophiles Discord server, but it's small and quiet. Maybe I should convert it to being for this channel if I'm really going to do this for real. I don't know. What do you think?